Daniel chapter 12, verse 1. And at that time shall Michael stand up, the great prince which standeth for the children of thy people, and there shall be a time of trouble, such as never was since there was a nation, even to that same time. And at that time thy people shall be delivered, every one that shall be found written in the book. Education, page 179. The present is a time of overwhelming interest to all living. Rulers and statesmen, men who occupy positions of trust and authority, thinking men and women of all classes, have their attention fixed upon the events taking place about us. They are watching the strained, restless relations that exist among the nations. They observe the intensity that is taking possession of every earthly element, and they recognize that something great and decisive is about to take place, that the world is on the verge of a stupendous crisis. Welcome to 144,000 Teachers, the first fruits unto God and to the Lamb. In the menu, we invite you to enter into the library and scroll down to section 14A, the Ultimate Country Living, with 19 digital books, which comes in PDF format and can be copied, teaching 8 country living skills in order to face, stay alive after the fall, and surviving martial law. Surviving martial law as a book has 47 pages. However, due to restraint in times, we cannot read all the 47 pages. So therefore, we encourage you to go to the book itself and read the book and learn how to prepare. What is martial law? The history of martial law in the United States. House Resolution number 645 and the Federal Emergency Management Agency concentration camps. The rules of martial law. Your rights during martial law. Martial law survival strategies. Comprehension questions with answers. What is martial law? Martial law is simply defined as the imposition of military rule. That means military authorities are supposed to take over the government temporarily over a specific region. This shall be declared during emergency situations on or when there is an impending threat to peace and order. When is martial law declared? The rule of the military or martial law is declared in instances when the civilian government may fail to maintain peace and order or security. It may also be declared when civilian authorities fail to provide essential services that citizens require under certain circumstances. In essence, martial law is meant to protect and serve the people in times when the government run by civilian authorities fail to function in an effective manner. This rule can be imposed in case one or more of the following situations are present. Number 1, in the case of natural disasters, which can become too overwhelming for civil authorities to manage. Number 2, extensive and uncontrollable riots and protests. Number 3, widespread disregard and disobedience of the law. Number 4, insurrection or rebellion. And number 5, in the case of a state of war. In times of natural disaster, national rulings vary. Some can put the area in a state of emergency. However, when the situation becomes uncontrollable and it is deemed the civil government is unable to control the situation, martial law may be considered as a resort. What happened then is that the military can take over in order to provide security and temporary governance until such a time that the situation is pacified or when matters have stabilized. Martial law may also be invoked when there is a threat of war. Such may start with widespread uprisings. Some nations have successfully utilized military rule in an effort to restore government control. In some cases, though, such plans have totally backfired. It happens when the military forces decides to take control, full control, and makes a move to replace the government. Many nations have resorted to martial law in the past. These nations include Canada, Egypt, Iran, Israel, Ireland, Korea, Pakistan, Mauritius, Philippines, Poland, Taiwan, Switzerland, Thailand, and Turkey, among others. Martial law has turned out differently in each of these countries. The United States has a history with martial law as well. The history of martial law in the United States. There have been several instances in United States history when it was determined that the imposition of the military force may help the situation. A clear distinction must be made, however, on what constitutes martial law and what is merely an enforcement of military justice, which is basically deployment of the military troops. Such a deployment does not necessarily constitute a martial law. However, at the instance the civil courts cease to function, the Supreme Court recognizes such as one of the key features of martial law. There are more than one instance when the United States have declared martial law, and for the sake of time again, we are including a few here. The territory of Hawaii in 1941 to 1944. Following the bombing of Pearl Harbor, Governor Poindexter imposed martial law. The main reason for such an imposition is that the loyalty of Hawaiians, who are mostly of Asian descent, was put into question. However, it was later on determined that the army overstepped their boundaries and set up a military dictatorship instead. Following this particular events, we are looking at one a little bit closer to our days, Hurricane Katrina in 2005. The widespread flooding following the Hurricane Katrina became too overwhelming for the civilian authorities to manage. Since the state of Louisiana lacks a legal construct for martial law, a state of emergency was called forth. This allowed the governor to make certain orders, including the suspension of laws, putting limitations of sale of items, including firearms and alcohol, as well as ordering evacuations. The governor stated the state of emergency to end on September 25, 2005, or terminated sooner. In some areas, looting has become widespread. In response to the chaos, Mayor Ray Nagin made a nominal declaration of martial law. He then ordered officers to disregard the Miranda rights and civil rights in an effort to put the looters at bay. Federal troops was a common sight around the city, accompanied by the National Guardsmen and even with the armed contractors of Blackwater, USA, to watch over the city. Quite recently, the bombing of Boston on April 15 that resulted to 3 deaths and more than 170 injuries forced the city to be placed under a total lockdown. On views, heavily armed National Guard troops with armored vehicles powered with machine guns and Black Hawk helicopters hovered around the city. Troops ordered residents to stay indoors and follow orders. Number 3, House Resolution number 645 and the FEMA concentration camp. For years, there have been widespread notion about certain measures taken in preparation of the imposition of martial law. Along with this preparation is the construction of what is believed to be concentration camps around the country. And such beliefs have been further strengthened by House Resolution number 645. What is House Resolution 645? H.R. 645 is a government bill that is directly related to the National Emergency Centers. A lot of people believe that these centers are constructed in various locations of the country, that is, in the USA. They are also commonly referred to as FEMA camps. It is believed that the construction of hundreds of these camps is on the way. H.R. 645, however, recommends that these national emergency centers should be built of a number no less than 6. The purpose of national emergency centers. There are 4 main purposes that these centers are supposed to serve. They are the following, as quoted from the bill itself. Number 1, to provide temporary housing, medical and humanitarian assistance to individuals and families dislocated due to the emergency or major disaster. Number 2, to provide centralized locations for the purposes of training and ensuring the coordination of local, state, and federal first responders. Number 3, to provide centralized locations for the improvement and coordination of preparedness, response, and recovery efforts of government, private and not-for-profit entities, and faith-based organizations. And finally, number 4, to meet other appropriate needs as determined by the Secretary of Homeland Security. In addition, the bill also tackles the minimum requirements that these national emergency centers should fulfill. For instance, Section 3 of the bill states that such a center should be able to meet the needs of the individuals should a major disaster occur or in the case of a national emergency. These needs shall cover the essential of health, housing, education, transportation, humanitarian, public works, and all essentials that are required for a smooth transition. This bill is not a bill that is absolutely good or absolutely wrong. It does have its share of good points and some downsides. On one hand, the construction of these national emergency centers is good because it helps the government prepare to handle certain situations that call for desperate measures, such as relocating the people from their homes to these camps. If a major disaster is to happen, control and full security needs to be enforced, and these are the main aims of the infrastructure. Moreover, based on the conditions set by the resolution, strict guidelines offer the best possible environment where the people may find temporary residence covering all basic needs and supplies such as food, medical aid, etc. On the other hand, such a full preparation causes worries too. Matters such as this, when a few people are given absolute power, it is open for abuse. And that's what is feared the most. There are loopholes that still need further clarification when it comes to this matter. 4, the rules of martial law. There are basically 6 things that can be expected when a nation is placed under martial laws. Such includes the following: observance of curfew hours, employment and businesses cease. Rations of food and supplies are handled by the military. Arrested individuals are subject to military tribunals. Security is top priority. Detention camps are a possibility. Looking now at these laws under the martial law or rules, curfew hours shall be observed. In a state of great threat, it is quite risky to stay outdoors after dark. Such will put individual in question. Therefore, one of the rules under martial law is the imposition of curfews, and everyone is expected to follow such rulings. Otherwise, there will be consequences. With the military forces spread around the area, their least concern is to question people who violate the curfew instead of lawful questioning. Violation of this simple ruling may subject one to an arrest instead of lawful questioning. With the civil rights suspended, this is a near possibility. Continuing, trouble can burst with people lurking around, so business and employment now shall be ceased under further notice. Since it is the military's job to restore peace and order, ensure safety and security, they will have a much easier time fulfilling such a duty with everyone within the confines of their homes. Economic activities will cease, but under martial law, that is not the main concern. The top priority instead is survival, and such can only be achieved if everyone is safe and secured. Businesses are expected to return to normal as soon as the martial ruling is lifted. The next one is rations of food and supplies are handled by the military. With people driven out of work and into their homes, the military is expected to take care of what people need in order to survive. This means food and supplies shall be rationed, and people shall rely on military assistance for the most basic of needs and essential. But people should not expect everything to be provided. This is why everyone is urged to make necessary preparations in the event of a martial rule that may take over. Arrested individuals are subject to military tribunals. Individuals who are arrested by the military because of certain violation or suspicion shall be subject to military tribunal. During martial law, the civil court, a civil trial, and a jury are not to be expected, or anything that may warrant a case under normal circumstances. Instead, a trial with a military commission takes place. These members of the military shall determine a suspected individual's fate. The fate of lawbreakers shall also be determined as soon as possible. Moreover, penalties are much heavier and more severe. This especially applies to cases linked to violence and terrorism. The iron fist is in full effect during times of martial law. Security is top priority as another rule. Strict rules shall be imposed. Mobilization and travels shall be limited and may also be restricted unless a permit is secure. But even that can prove to be quite a challenge to obtain. These actions have to be taken to keep the perimeter in check and to control activities as much as possible. Detention camps are to be expected. With civil rights suspended and the military authorized to arrest people, an influx in the number of detainees is to be expected. To control such a problem, detention camps may serve a purpose. In fact, in 2001, following the terrorist attacks of 9/11, the President issued an order addressed to the military discussing in detail the detention, trials, and treatment of non-citizens in the name of the war against terrorism. This means individuals under suspicion, including non-citizens, provided they are reasonably suspected, may be placed in detention centers. A trial may be conducted with the military commission presiding. Such measures have been pondered upon. It is no secret that the government has made arrangements with the Department of Homeland Security regarding the construction of detention facilities in preparation for national emergencies. The use of these facilities in the event of martial law is a near possibility. The bottom line is everyone is expected to follow the rules with no question asked. Everyone is expected to follow the lead of the military force. Violators and lawbreakers shall face severe consequences. Under martial law, the good of the individual is rarely a concern. Common good or the survival of the nation is the priority. And in order to ensure that such an objective of security and survival is achieved, compromises on individual rights are to be implemented. In addition to the 6 basic rules above, this is what martial law shall look like upon its imposition as directed by the following executive orders. If you look at the list, which is quite elaborate, you can see the first one is Executive Order 10995. All communications media shall be seized by the federal government. This means everything from the radio to newspaper and TV and all modes of communication, including telephones, CBs, ham, and the internet shall be placed under the full control of the federal government. In other words, the First Amendment shall be suspended. No more freedom. Executive Order 10997 states that fuels, minerals, and electrical power shall be under federal control. Executive Order 10998 proclaims farms and farm equipments, including all food sources, shall be placed under the custody of the government. And listen to this, hoarding of food shall be strictly prohibited, as everything shall be heavily regulated. And this is part of martial law. You cannot have food in your home. Executive Order 10999. It declares that all methods of transportation shall be controlled by the government control. Moreover, the government reserves the right to seize any vehicle. Executive Order 11000 dictates that all civilians, when the need arises, may be called for work, and they shall be under federal supervision. Under Executive Order 11490, presidential control shall cover all U.S. citizens, churches, and businesses during a time of emergency. Executive Order 12919 appoints various cabinet officials to prepare to take charge of virtually all aspects of the U.S. economy. Executive Order 13010 orders FEMA to take charge and preside over all government agencies during a time of emergency, while FEMA is to remain under control of the executive body. Executive Order 12656 is all about the assignment of emergency preparedness responsibilities. This order covers takeover of the federal government of the law enforcement functions. Wages and prices shall also be under federal control. It is strictly prohibited to move assets whether in or out of the country, and all travels are also restricted. And this is in a so-called free country with amendments to protect the freedom of its citizen. And this is why there is so much concern about this particular law of the martial law, because it gives a lot of control to the government and the army. Now, what are your rights and my rights during martial law? You just heard about those particulars there. Several limitations are set against martial law as determined by courts. Most of these prohibitions are derived from the American Civil War and World War II. In fact, the Congress passed the Posse Comitatus Act in 1878. This act prohibits the military from getting involved in the domestic law enforcement unless approved by the Congress. However, the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2012 completely contradicts the Posse Comitatus Act of 1878. This is a fairly new Authorization Act for the fiscal year 2012. As you can see, the major difference in date. The former gives authorization to the U.S. military not only to interfere but completely perform the functions of law enforcement. And this is where we are today, wondering where are our right left. And that's why we encourage you. We will not read these particulars here, but this involves the link between the right of habeas corpus and martial law. And now these basically take over. The Constitution of the United States clearly proclaims that the right of habeas corpus must be upheld unless the situation may call for it, but a suspension of such a right may be warranted in the case of rebellion, invasion, or genuine threat to public safety. In this situation, cancellation of the writ of habeas corpus may even become a requirement. In addition to the right of habeas corpus, other civil rights are suspended along with it. When these rights are supposed to protect the people from a tyrannical rule, people have the right to be concerned about their own safety and security against abuse. Although martial law may have been founded under purely good intentions to serve the purpose of the people, there is a huge doubt about how such a power will be utilized, whether it is for common good or for the perpetrator own gains. So these are the individual rights that are compromised under martial law. And we're speaking about the United States of America, but many countries around the world, which are still democratic countries, are protected by those rights. If you read it carefully, this manuscript is actually representative of what happened when a socialist communist country takes over, or when a Sunday law will be declared in the United States, and because of people rebelling against it, they can impose a martial law. So those are the rights that will be compromised under a martial law, and they have been in the past. The right of habeas corpus, the right to information, freedom of expression, right to privacy, right to make choices. In a word, all our rights are taken away, and they have passed those laws already. Now, martial law's survival strategies. So that could be an encouragement because we have some positive that we can present here. Martial law may be justified and it may even be declared lawfully. However, it can also put you and your family at great risk. But if you are prepared, think, and react calmly and rationally, you should be able to get through the challenge without a single scratch. And what we'll be doing here, we will simply scroll and go one by one of those strategies without reading them all. And again, we give you the link for your perusal and encourage you to study and prepare yourself. During martial law, the federal government takes control of everything, including food sources and supplies. Instead of depending on ration from the military, you should try to be as self-dependent as possible. Having a generator and fuel to power it, and of course food and some cash to spare are essential for survival. You should have supplies to last you for at least 30 days at the minimum. Ideally, you would have supplies that can last you and your family for 12 months. Bartering goods and services is also crucial to your survival. And for that to work, you need to maintain a circle of allies. It reminds us of what has happened during the Second World War. And when you study the Second World War, it's very, very big teaching, especially when you study the survivor of the Second World War, and more particularly the Jewish people, and take time to listen to their testimony. And they're still very valued today, how they're surviving because they have a circle of allies. They had a lot of support. Always be safe. Always be safe, because most of the time, an imposition of martial law is often a response to attack, social revolts, and danger. Your way of survival involves staying out of trouble as much as possible. Ensure the protection of your home with an alarm system. Keep your house locked and your property secure. Make sure you have company at all times and do not stray away from the safe area. Know about the rules and follow them as much as possible to keep a low profile. By following the rules, we don't mean following the sheep to the slaughterhouse. You will have to decide on an individual case by case basis when it's time to rebel against the rule, and when, if you do, make sure to you are fully prepared to protect yourself as you make further progress. Martial law prioritizes public protection, which is why there may be a need to put civil liberties behind. Learn about the rules and follow them strictly. This is the key to avoid attention, which is essential in martial law survivor. Make sure you obey the curfew, among others. Prepare a survival kit. Again, we could read it for you. We want you to take time to study these things if they have value, because they have. And here is a list of the things you will need to prepare for martial law survivor. A sturdy backpack, a first aid kit. This is for in case you have injuries or sickness. Weapons such as bearded axe, bow, knife, and pocket knives. Some people do not believe in self-defense. Pieces of clothing, a sturdy pair of boots, rain gear, flashlight, medicine, navigational equipment like a compass, watch, batteries, cooking equipment, radio, and for protection you could have pepper spray and things that are not necessarily to kill, but you can protect yourself and your family nevertheless. And we have in this booklet too, you will see there are actually a lot of information regarding how to prepare a self-defense kit, which is not necessarily using guns, but there is a way that we can defend ourselves in a case like this. Turn into official broadcast, but listen to HAM radio as well. So since the communication media become controlled by the federal government, freedom of the press is curtailed in times of martial law. So instead of relying on mass media, stay tuned to official broadcasts instead. This way, you will be kept updated about the rules which are in effect. This is how you can survive. Stay out of the city. Your survival rate is higher if you stay in the rural area versus urban locations or populated area in general. And these skills that are being talked about in this series of digital booklet, those 19 booklets, they actually show how to get a property in the country, or if you have one, stay out of the city, and still create a kind of a survival type of a system with gardening. And we're going to show you that in the next sessions. Now to prepare food that can last, preserve food, very, very important. And this is not a scare tactic. We're very serious about it, because a mass arrest is an event that should never be underestimated. This is why you must avoid riots at all costs or meddling in these kinds of affairs and activity. Keep in mind that your civil rights and liberties are suspended under martial law, including the right to due process. Make sure everyone in your family is accounted for. And build an alliance. This is again example that we recommend to study, do those tactics to survivors of the Second World War or wars that have passed. During desperate times, teamwork is essential. Having a support system by building an alliance with your friends, neighbors, can help increase your chances of survival without getting into any kind of problem. You can help each other out. You have to make sure, however, that you ally with people who share the same views as you do and who have the same objective. That will help you to survive such trying times. And this is very fitting for what we read about Daniel chapter 12. We believe that there is a time that is coming that people who believe differently than the main religion under the New World Order religion, that will be difficult for people to survive. And they will be accused of bringing all the trouble upon the earth. Keep your mouth shut. Oversharing of information can get you in a lot of trouble. It may be not polite, but in the time of risk like this, you want to be very, very wise. Discretion is one of the 7 pillars of wisdom. If you study the pillar of wisdom in Proverbs 1, 2, and 3, you will find out that discretion is a pillar of wisdom. When people become desperate, they will do anything to survive and get their hands on food and supplies. It is then in your best interest to keep it to yourself and your family. Do not tell your neighbors about the prepping you are doing. And often we see people, even in meetings or in the media, telling how they have prepared this big place, and you're not supposed to order food, so you can remember that. But then they tell the whole world. These things are preparation for the time of trouble, and they tell the whole world. In these times, ordering of food is restricted. Moreover, you may become the center of attention and be attacked for the food you have stocked up. On the other hand, this does not necessarily mean you have to be selfish. Share if you can. Plan your food storage. The military will implement house-to-house searches without warrant. This is an effort to locate guns. Along with their search for guns, however, they may find your food supplies stocked up. It is then important that you plan your storage too. Keep it in an area of the house where it will not be easily found or located. The last thing you want is to put all your efforts in preparation to waste. Very, very similar of prior to the Second World War. If, like all of us or some of us here, we are born before the era of people forgetting the Second World War. And when you're born in the 1940s after the Second World War, you have learned a lot of things from that era. And it's very important. These advice are very, very good. Always think first. At a time when emotions are running high, it gets much easier to be reactive. But in these times, you always have to think first before you react. Rationality can help you survive martial law. And then, of course, beside being rationalized, you have to be calm. Panic can do harm. So the best thing to do in such a trying times is to remain composed and calm. It may prove to be quite a challenge, but if it means your survival, you should exert your best effort. And of course, take a stand. When the situation is at its climax, your stance on matters is put into question. There is nothing wrong with taking sides. When you do pick one, make sure it suits your personal beliefs and principles. Moreover, this does not necessarily mean you should join the resistance. Keep in mind, there is always an alternative way of fighting for what you believe in other than taking it to the streets. Like they're mentioning the riots and go into all of these groups, very, very dangerous, especially if the martial law can be declared anytime when there is danger for the security of the country. You have to read these books. They're very important. In the last section, comprehension question, we're just going to scroll for you because the next section will give you the answer to those questions. So what specific situations warrant the declaration of martial law? What can be expected under a martial law? What does the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2012 entail? What are the 6 basic rules of martial law? What does a military tribunal mean? All of these questions, in case of natural disaster or internal conflict, what is commonly used in place of martial law? And is there a difference between enforcement of military justice and martial law? These questions are basically being answered. As you can see, why is it important to plan your food storage? The best way also for food storage, which we teach in our classes, we cannot do it only on a 14-day conference, but we do teach, and it's part of our section in the library, we do teach how to prepare food, and it can be prepared in different way. Dry food can survive a very long time, and especially beans, where you can actually do a lot of things with beans and do not require much room. So these are the things that we're preparing. Many people do not expect that from 144,000teachers.org, but we are a people who are preparing. We are a school preparing intelligent, educated survivors. Remember Numbers 1317? Which stands for Numbers chapter 13, verse 17, when the spy went to Canaan to spy the land. So please study to be found approved, because the Heavenly Father is willing for us to survive. And these here are the answer to those questions that are presented above. So we will leave you to this, taking the time to study and become intelligent to those things that are about to come upon the world, because we have prepared, we are presenting one particular subject that we know could bring trouble, and it has to do directly with the calendar. In closing, we will read from Testimony for the Church, number 5, page 136. Already the judgment of God are abroad in the land, as seen in storms, in floods, in tempests, in earthquakes, in perils by land and by sea. The great I Am is speaking to those who make void his law. When God's wrath is poured out upon the earth, who will then be able to stand? Now is the time for God's people to show themselves true to principle. And this is probably the most important part of that paragraph. When the religion of Christ is most held in contempt, when his law is most despised, then should our zeal be the warmest and our courage and firmness the most unflinching. To stand in defense of truth and righteousness when the majority forsake us, to fight the battles of the Lord when champions are few, this will be our test. At this time, we must gather warmth from the coldness of others, courage from their cowardice, and loyalty from their treason. The nation will be on the side of the great rebel leader. May the Lord bless you and give you wisdom what to do and how to apply these principles. And it's better to be informed and prepared and maybe not needing it than wishing to be prepared when it's already coming to pass. May the Lord bless you.